And we are back. Um, I think we should get an award for consistency. Um, Maybe that's the theme coming into the new year. We've been consistent, finding the time, finding the space to um, just come here and enjoy conversations around creativity. I think the last few episodes have been like deeply personal, and I want to say it's with intention. I feel like we talked about like this idea of empathy, um, and in it we experience life from the vantage point or the perspective of somebody else. And I've been open to this point in hopes that in hearing my story, it almost like relates to your own, and you can see yourself in that story. Because I always want this to feel honest and authentic, and I'm conscious of it. It came up in conversation, so yeah, this is it's been therapeutic. It's been a lot of things, and I'm hoping it's the same for you. But I always for sure want the main focus to be about you and your creativity and everything around that. We're going to start off how we always start off, with an exercise in mindfulness, focusing on your breath. As always, I prefer your eyes closed, but we're going to do 10 breaths starting now. And now that we're here, I have a brain teaser for you. What comes once in a month? No, I'm sorry. What comes once in a minute, twice in a moment, but never in 1,000 years? What comes once in a minute, twice in a moment, but never in 1,000 years? The new year has been interesting, and it has given me an opportunity to, I don't know, like uh, alter my approach a little. But I don't want to say that, because I feel like I'm still the same me, and I'm still doing the things that are like innately or naturally who I am. But and I don't want to say it's a slow start, but I go through these moments or pockets in time where like I'm inside. You know, everybody say like I'm outside. Well, there's these moments where I'm inside. So I don't. It's either I'm building or like just being with family, and but then the world, at least my world, is starting to open up again. And in it, I get to interact with other creatives, other innovators, other people who are out building things, and just living, right? So I had an opportunity to step out last night, and there's this dinner that I attend, which is normally like a collection of founders or business owners or innovators in their own right. And the last few dinners, I had the opportunity to talk to a friend of mine, and he was talking about just his own journey in the space that he plays, and he's in real estate. And the last time I saw him, he was talking about just kind of walking away from the venture that he was on, or he was in, that he ran. And this might have been like 2 or 3 weeks ago. And then we met up again last night with a few other people. And when I saw him, he was like, man, I have a new idea. And he said it was in the same realm of like his area of expertise, which is like real estate, which I have every reason to believe that he's an expert in his field. And then he he started to present this idea, and I could tell that like there was excitement about it, because it almost feels like he's waiting on this thing, like the culmination of all his efforts and expertise and smarts and intelligence and creativity. He's looking for the thing where it culminates. As he's presenting it to me, like I do this thing when I hear ideas. It's this weird thing, and I'm only now thinking about it like out loud. Where one, there's the innovative side of me, the innovator, the person that people go to validate ideas, but in tandem, there's also this part of me that's just listened from the human experience, and sometimes they could be conflicting, or I'm conflicted internally, but I try not to show that as I'm listening to and trying to figure out this thing. And he was talking, and as he's long-winded naturally, but like he was telling the story and about this idea of his, and he presented it. And as he's presenting, I could feel myself wanting to ask a question. And as I'm going to ask the question, like he sensed that there's a question where he's like, "Oh wait, it's going to come together. It's going to come together." And he kept going, and then same thing happened. I'm like, "Oh, but," and he's like, "No, it's going to come together." And then finally, after like, I don't know, maybe 5 minutes, which doesn't seem like a long time, but in conversation and pitching an idea, it is eons long. It is years long. And I remember listening to him, and at this time we're walking now because we were at the bar, and now we're walking towards where we're at the table. And I looked at him, and as I'm trying to think of what to say, I remember telling him like, do you trust yourself? And he might have said like, yes. And then I also, in that same thought, I asked him, do you ever feel like your efforts have to match either your intellect, that the work that you create has to match the complexity of which you present yourself to the world? And he paused for a second, and then he thought about it. And then I think he may have said yes. And what I followed up with how I honestly felt, I said, and I remember telling him like, yo, like you're really smart. You really understand the space that you play in. But for every idea you've ever given me or you presented to me, it almost feels like you're over-complicating it. Like a simpler version of whatever it is that you're building cannot or should not exist because it's coming from you. And what I've learned in my own experience, the more knowledge you have, there's one end of it where it almost feels like everything feels convoluted or complicated. But in parallel, there's also this idea that the more knowledge makes it easier for you to explain things in even simpler fashion. And in that conversation, he followed up by asking me, like, how do I stay focused on the thing that I'm working on? And I gave him this analogy, which I'm not going to bore you with. But what I do want to say is, in a previous episode, we talked about just this idea of overproduction and overproducing. And I think one of the dilemmas of being a creative is just the fear of execution. And we spend so much time in the creative process and then adding layers and adding functionalities or features or design or more creativity. And all it does ultimately, it just convolutes or it overpopulates or almost bloats the idea and the intention. and we run from this idea of like just executing. And in that conversation when we had it, there was this fear when it comes to execution, and we ran from it because we didn't want the responsibility associated with it. But as these conversations progressed and we have the opportunity to talk more about creativity, I've realized that execution in itself is a creative act. And it's less about avoiding it, and more about embracing the idea of executing upon whatever creative ideas that you do have. And in execution is when you can almost work towards simplifying what it is that you're working on. And I think a lot of us creatives, because we fear the execution aspect of it, we never get to experience the simplification of it. And we find ourselves just in this never-ending cycle of adding, when in reality, creativity can also mean the subtraction in an idea or in a concept that is where we see it as less being more. I feel like creativity should ultimately be more clarity than it is complexity. I think it should always be quality over quantity. And sometimes as creatives, we see complexity as a measurement of genius, as a measurement of like authenticity. We see it as a measurement of like craftsmanship. And I don't think that that is the case. I feel like the best designs, the best showcase of creativity is when it's in its simplest form, and it can be consumed or embraced by the spectrum of appreciators or consumers in general. I don't know what the right word, because art again can showcase itself in multiple different ways, and I want to like speak to it from an all-encompassing medium as opposed to kind of narrow it to this like one thing. I don't want people who consume your art to be consumers, maybe receivers of the art, and I think there's satisfaction that comes from simplifying creative work. There is satisfaction that comes from completing work. And if we continue this idea of having to overproduce and overcomplicate our creative work, I think there's a huge part of creativity that we'll never get to experience. And I don't want us to get to feel trapped by our own desires or yearning to want to seem complex, as if though it is it's an indication of creative excellence. I don't think that it is. I think it in reality it's the opposite. And I feel like simplification or simple or simplified creative work doesn't necessarily mean that it is unintelligent or unsophisticated Um, and I think we need to get out of this habit of associating complexity with completion, or complexity with ideal. I think they exist in separate regions of creativity, and I don't think one is a measurement of the other. And as I was like talking about it, and thinking about it, like about just his execution, I started to kind of ask him like why do you think that is? And I don't know that he really had an answer for it, but I do know that when he speaks, I do get the sense that he wants, or he would like for you to understand, or at least be aware of how intelligent he is. And I don't know that that's any fault of his own, or I don't. And I'm sitting here, I could be projecting, or I could maybe be speaking out of turn here, and I could be completely wrong. But I see that in that same characteristic, or that same MO in the ideas that he generates. And every time I hear him talk about it, like my immediate thought is, you don't have to convince me that you are smart. How you execute, how you implement, how you get from point A to point B is going to show that to me. That is the best illustrator. Matter of fact, I think intelligence isn't measured by it is not completely measured by articulation. I feel like being able to use words is a creative gift, and using it in a way that is compelling and convincing is also a creative gift. But putting words together without intention, or without impact, is mumbo jumbo a word, like or a term. It just doesn't do anything. I've heard people talk, and because I listen so well, hearing them talk, I just think like you're saying a whole bunch of nothing. And there's people who are good at saying a whole bunch of nothing. And how you separate yourself from the people who just say a whole bunch of nothing is how you do a whole bunch of something. And I think execution is the key. Implementation is the key. And it's not about complexity. It's not about how you can make it sound. It's all about what you can make it do. And I feel like the doing has to be intentional. It has to be specific. It should feel effortless. And I think complexity and effortlessness don't necessarily hold hands. I would argue that they might be adversaries. I think one of the things we've also talked about, especially in the same realm of ideas, how important it is to have constraints in the creative process, and set limitations, because it allows you to showcase your creative prowess. And a part of reducing the complexity is you do that by adding constraints and limitations. And maybe we don't want to be challenged. Like, every creative act or creative problem or obstacle, it won't be a case where the world is your oyster and you have unlimited amounts of resource or time or effort, or the freedom to just build on top of what is already there. Sometimes it's about not having anything available to you, and then building from the bare minimum. And I think limiting yourself allows you to do that. And in that same limitation, and in setting boundaries and criterias and restrictions, it almost like it acts as a way to prevent you from not only overproducing but overburdening yourself. I think burnout is common within creative spaces, creative places, and creative people, and you have to be the one that manages that for yourself. And I think reducing complexity is one way to do that. And if you're in search of quality over a consistent period of time, I think the best way to do that is to limit not only production, but just overproduction, and pacing yourself and pacing your creativity, and deciding, just as we mentioned, that this idea of creativity in its execution in itself is a creative act. I think simplification is also a creative act. And being able to complete a project and use a process that is simplified, but have an impact as if though that wasn't the case, I think is the true test of your creative abilities. And I would encourage you to all be less overproducers and focus on simplifying efforts, simplifying creative process, and simplifying creativity in general. And you'd be surprised with the outcome, and you might not only challenge yourself, but you're going to surprise yourself with the works of art that actually come from it. I'm not going to hold you any longer. I will end this how we started. What comes once in a minute, twice in a moment, but never in 1,000 years. The letter M. As always, it's a pleasure to have you, to share space with you. We'll see how we can remain consistent. I'm not even going to put pressure on myself or you to try to do this with the same cadence for the rest of the year, but we're off to a great start. I'm looking forward to the rest of the year. I will leave you how I always leave you. Go be great.